Okay, here we go. Today I'm talking to Dr. Jonathan P. Higgins at Dr. John Paul, who is a professor, national speaker, freelance journalist, thought leader, and media critic who examines the intersections of identity, gender, and race in entertainment. Dr. John, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing really well. I have a cat on my lap. Can't complain. Thanks for being
Love the
here.
baby.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
Yeah. I know we've like wanted to do this for a while and it's like the day is finally here.
hmm Definitely that.
Yeah. I feel like it's worth mentioning for anyone listening how we met.
Yeah.
Yeah.
First off, shout out to did you want to do the intro? Did you want me to do it?
What intro?
Well, I mean in terms of how we met.
Oh, you can tell it.
You're
Um,
freezing. Yeah, go ahead.
oh,
Sorry.
well, let's pause for a second. I'd love to hear how you were introduced to Centauri Co. and me and how we met from you.
So shout out to the amazing Jiminica Eborn for all of the great things that they do. Me and Jim, so kind of related but not related. Me and Jim have been friends for like, goodness gracious, maybe I would say 2003, 2004. We met in college and we've been friends ever since. And then fast forward 10 years later and they are doing all of this, I hate using the word influencer, but they're doing a lot of work in different influential spaces.
Yeah, yeah.
And oh yeah, I want to say it that way. They're not an influencer, they're doing influential work in influential
I
spaces.
love that.
And um and so they ultimately said, hey, I work with this organization. We know that all of the stuff last year happened with George Floyd. A lot of conversations needing to happen around race and and gender and perspectives on oppression, et cetera, et cetera. Could you come and talk with the folks that I work with, doing, the work that we do in relation to being intimacy coordinators? And I said, sure, not a problem. We linked up, had a couple of sessions. We talked before the training, we did the training, and then we connected after the training. And it's just been great, not only to one, see Jim continue to do amazing things, but ultimately to see you, Mia, and your org do great things as well. So that's ultimately how everything kind of linked up. Great people know great people, and you're one of the great people that my great people knew. So I'm happy to be here.
Oh, thank you. That's really wonderful to hear. Jim, the way that it happened on our end was that we were like, we knew we needed to talk about Centauri Co. is run by me, Yehuda Duenas, and Jiminica Eborn. Yehuda and I are the only intimacy coordinators. Jiminica is a trauma specialist, the trauma queen, and she does a whole bunch of other things. But we knew we needed to talk about race. Centauri Co. was built to make sure that there were intimacy coordinators who were at the time underrepresented in the field. And we all kind of had this meeting and we were like, do I know anybody who could do this? Does Yehuda know anybody who could do this? And Jim was like, I know somebody who can do this. And it was you. And
hmm
then, we ended up having a really beautiful class. And
It was great.
yeah, it was amazing. It was amazing for me, and I know Yehuda too, to like be a fly on the wall for that conversation. And especially with your background specifically in entertainment, I think
Mm.
it just became a conversation that was like so incredibly necessary, and I don't know where else that conversation would have happened.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So let me ask you, how short version or long version, how you ended up with this like hodgepodge career that you have. And I say that with admiration and also like I also have a hodgepodge
Mhm.
of a career. So I'm curious how you got to this point.
Yeah. It's funny because this is maybe the third or fourth conversation I've had today alone where people feel like, how did you get here? And I'm like, girl, I don't know. Um it's like it just chat, I just, I guess, the universe said we gonna use you. Really, I think a big part of it really did start with this idea of growing up in a world where I didn't see myself,
Mhm.
not necessarily feeling like my voice was heard and feeling like I didn't really have anyone championing me. I ultimately started looking for ways to do that for other people. I said, if no one's going to champion me, then I might as well champion myself. And
Mm.
in the process of doing that, I think people started like paying attention to what I had to say and ultimately saying, oh my God, if Dr. John Paul feels this way, then that means I feel this way, then that means there's got to be other people who feel this way. And I think it's just now this collective mindset of people, whether it be in academia, whether it be in entertainment, whether it be company wide, organizational, like there are just so many people in the world. It's funny because I used to get on LinkedIn. I'll say this and then I'll kind of wrap it up, but I used to get on LinkedIn and I would like look at all of the stories and all of the stuff people were sharing, and it was all about business and what was going on in their minds and their lives. And I've been picking apart in a very comedic way the ways that we oppress people in the work perspective, if that makes sense, whether it be in entertainment or not. And I make a joke out of it, not to be joking, but to just get people to understand how silly a lot of this stuff is that we say, and a lot silly the stuff we do is, and how problematic it is when you really look at it from a comedic standpoint. Because for me, my thing is that I sometimes have to laugh to keep from crying. And so my thing is that if I constantly kept, screaming about the bad in the world, I would always be out in a corner, like ready to ball up and pass away in a lot of senses. So I think for me, the way that I've been able to cope is to look at the ways these systems are terrible and make a joke out of them. And so across the platform, that's what I'm kind of known for now, is people saying you have a very funny comedic way of looking
Mm.
at really jacked up things, and being able to get us to talk about them in a way that doesn't feel like you're ultimately um I don't do it in a way where I feel like I'm blaming anyone. I'm challenging people to step back and think about the ways that they are either complicit or not taking action. And that's ultimately what I do now. I'm challenging people to step up to the plate, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Hearing you say that makes me feel like it's just sort of adding to like the reasons why I feel like why we resonate like with each other. I've
Mhm.
also gotten that feedback that like there's something about how I approach these really like challenging topics that has a sense of humor, and like thank goodness, right? Because otherwise,
Right.
as you said, like I could hide in my closet with my cats and my new dog and just like never leave
Mm.
out of despair.
Right.
Um but there is something, I mean, do you find yourself drawn to like dark humor?
Yes.
Yes.
I have a very dark sense of humor. So I have to catch myself
I was
sometimes
like, how did I
because
know? I
ooh,
knew I
child,
had a
sometimes
feeling.
it can get real dark and people be like, that's not funny. And I'm like, but it's funny to
It's
me.
funny.
And I don't say that like I'm laughing at the expense of other people, but I'm thinking to myself, like, there have been moments where I have cracked jokes in spaces where people are like, ooh. And I'll be like, I'm sorry. Like, I have to laugh at that because if I don't, I'm gonna cry.
Yeah.
And so it's one of those things that's like dark humor, I wouldn't say I'm like dark, gruesome humor funny, but I definitely find, like, so for instance, me and my random tangent, but it makes a lot of sense. Like me and my husband rented that Barb, and I forget what her name is, like Barb and Marge goes to like Vista something. It's the new movie with a Kristen Wiig. And the humor
Uh-huh.
is my humor. It's just a lot of it is very much these two women who have had really traumatic experiences have been able to find funny in their traumatic experiences. That's how I move throughout my life, where I've been able to really look at some really jacked up things that have happened to me and find humor in them to help other people heal and their own lived experiences through humor. So that's how I like to frame that.
Yeah. It's
Mhm.
make the way that you're describing it, I'm like making this link for the first time that you know how like in sexuality, it's often talked about how there's like a
Mhm.
really fine line between pain and pleasure and like sometimes they're the same,
Yeah.
you know? Um and I
Mhm.
think it must be the
Yeah.
same kind of emotionally where like there's you know the laughing and crying like laughing and crying are really close to each other and sometimes you're
Mhm.
doing both and I think where my sense of humor feels the most pronounced and the most me is like in those moments where I'm like that is so sad it's hilarious.
That's so me. I'm like, oh my God, that is so terrible. But it's so funny.
Yeah.
And I think there's also I think it's a talent. I think it's a talent, I think, to be resilient enough to be able to look at something that's really, really awful and to be able to find humor in it in a way that makes other people laugh or feel seen or find joy. Like, I crack a lot of jokes about my father not being in my life, where some people are probably working that out through therapy. For me, it's funny. Like, there are a lot of things that I say, and people are like, oh my God, I can't believe you said that. That's really sad. And I'm like, I've healed from it. And I think that that's where I think some of the comedy comes from. I think Robin Williams is a great example of someone who
Mm,
was able to laugh through a lot of their pain. Rest in peace.
mhm.
I do know that they passed away ultimately to their own demise, but I think when you look at when you look at a lot of comedians,
Yeah.
and the ways that they frame their lives, they're able to really take a lot of their dark, sad moments and make them enjoyable for other people to be able to laugh through their own pain as well. So I think that's what I do.
Yeah. Yeah, that comes through. That comes through. And
Mhm.
it's to it's almost a question of sustainability, right? Like
Yeah.
cuz how can we
Yeah.
keep doing really challenging work around justice and oppression and all these other things and for me it's also like wrapped up in illness and ability
Mhm.
and I don't know I don't want to speak for you around that but so it's all it's a it's only sustainable if it can
Right.
also have light moments. Without those
Mhm.
light moments, it's you just want it to end as quickly as you
Right.
can. It's making me think of like when I was really in the like throes of my illness um and really struggling with like my mental health and suicidal ideation, all that stuff. Like the thing that would save me often was just poop jokes.
Mm.
Because I was dealing with like actual poop issues and I could just laugh
Mhm.
about, you know, I don't know, that was like sort of how I coped for a while.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the thing I think that makes so many people, I think specifically creative, so creative. Um, and such good people, I think, is when you can really look and separate yourself, like when you're not able to really, like, when you don't feel like that trauma or whatever you're going through in your life no longer kind of has a hold on you. That is where I think the best, not necessarily even comedy, because I don't want to consider myself a comedian, but I
Mhm.
definitely think, like, I've been in spaces where people are like, John, you are just so damn funny. And I'm like, I've done my whole life, all I've ever done is cry, like,
Yeah.
in a lot of ways, whether it be like literal tears or being in peril, or like you said, dealing with suicidal ideations. And
Yeah.
so I think I'm finally at a place now in my life where, like, I keep thinking, if I continue to keep crying about everything or being sad about everything or being hurt about everything, I'm not going to ever be able to enjoy life. So I have to figure out a way to laugh. And I think the biggest part is, like, I'm not laughing at someone, I'm laughing at something. And
Mhm.
most of the time, the things that I'm laughing at is how stupid white supremacy is, like, or how stupid sexism is. Like, when you start to break it down to like when you really start to get down to like the foundation of each of these different oppressions, they're all so foolish, you know? And
Right.
I think that's the thing I really help people get to with a lot of my work. It's I'm able to really help people see how so much of what we worry about and how much we stress over is a joke. And when I say that, I don't mean that in the sense of like, ha ha ha, sexism is funny. No, it's not. It's terrible. But what I'm talking about is how stupid sexism is when we start looking at it from the prospects of all of these standards men live up, want to keep themselves up to. Really, like this is silly. Like this is all
It,
foolish. This is all stupid. So
Dr. John,
that's
you
kind
just
of where I'm at.
you froze for a moment. You said the last thing I heard was these standards that men try to live up to, and then you cut out. I'd love to hear what you
Oh,
said.
yeah. Sorry, I said, I said a lot of it is foolish, and I said a lot of it is really stupid, specifically the different standards that, cis men set themselves up to, right? Oh, I can't cry, I can't have any emotion, I have to be a man. And I've written about this, like, what does it really mean to be a man? And a lot of times, a lot of it is rooted in not having any joy. That's what a lot of what I
Ooh.
find in society manliness, quote unquote, is connected to, is a lot of them have no joy. You can't, you asking, well, what brings you joy? Oh, shooting someone, doing this. And it's like, so causing someone else pain, like what outside of the pain that you're hiding and you're masking or that you're causing or putting on other people, what is joy, right? And I think
Wow.
that that's the thing I've been able to do for me when I'm laughing, or when I crack a joke, or when I'm laughing through a lot of the pain that I'm bringing, that's joy for me. Like for me, a lot of the most joy that I found is being in spaces with other queer Black people and being able to laugh about the stuff that we've both gone through as Black queer people, and really being able to laugh at how we've overcome it. Like that for me is like what joy looks like. So I think about that stuff a lot, right? Like, you know, when we really get down to the crux of like what is giving any of us joy, I don't know if we're really, if we spend enough time thinking about that. And that's kind of where I think a lot of my comedic humor comes from.
Wow. That link that you've made is blowing my mind. That not wanting to cry is
Mhm.
related to not being able to experience joy. Is there something
Yeah.
that you think is vulnerable about joy?
Well, I mean, when we look at joy from, I think so, like, let's talk through it, right? Let's talk
Yeah,
through it from like a media standpoint, because
right.
obviously my degree is in communications. I'm going to always be very critical of media because I have a bachelor's degree in media studies.
Mhm.
Um, so like, I think when we look at like we don't ever, I, I don't, I'll say for me, and I would challenge listeners, because I'm sure listeners would probably say Dr. Higgins is wrong. Okay. And I might be. I cannot think of a film that I have seen in the last 5 to 10 years where you've genuinely seen a cis straight man happy. There is
Whoa.
always a crux of him either needing to get revenge, him being angry, him needing to inflict pain on someone else, even down to Fight Club, right? Like if we really was to look at the themes throughout Fight Club, very popular film in a lot
Mhm.
of men's circles. A lot of men, my favorite film is Fight
Yeah,
Club.
yeah.
What was going on with this man? This man was literally falling apart in his own mind, right? And a lot of people have said, oh, that film is, about mental health. Yeah, it could potentially be about mental health if that's what you come up with. But what drove him to have those mental health issues,
Mm.
right? He didn't have any friends. He hated the job that he was at. He couldn't find anyone to connect with on a both a sexual and an intimacy level. We we create this moniker for cis men, specifically cis straight men, that joy is rooted on the pain and the what's the word I'm looking for? I want to say pain, even pressure. I think pressure is the first word that comes to my lexicon of interjecting that onto someone else, right? joy is not rooted in I have a very strong relationship. Like, so for instance, for me, right, as a queer Black man who has done my work with a therapist, joy
Mhm.
for me is when I'm laying on the couch with my husband and we're laughing as we're watching TV.
Mhm.
Joy for me is when I'm being vulnerable to my husband and I'm saying, I'm tired of X, Y, and Z, and I just want to be heard. And my husband goes, no, babe, I hear you. Like, that's joy for me. Joy for me is when I'm on the phone with Jiminica and we're cracking jokes back and forth about
Mhm.
shows that we share interest in. Men don't get that.
Mm.
And I say that not in the think societally
Wait. Oh
created.
shit. Wait, you're
I said societally. Yeah,
yes.
yeah, I said societally. I think we've created this crux that men have to men the only way for men to find joy is when they're inflicting pain onto someone else.
Ugh.
That for me is what I take at it from the perspective of looking at system. And again, that may not be everyone else's truth, but let's
Right.
think about it. What is rape culture?
Yeah.
What is sexism, right? What is toxic masculinity? You are inflicting harm on someone else in order for you to feel better about who you are.
Well,
So I go ahead.
yeah, what I'm hearing is that it's portrayed as though or what you're saying is that joy for cis men is portrayed as um it's still within a hierarchy. It's about being at the
Mhm.
top of the hierarchy. So you still have to be
Right.
on top of somebody, which means that you're probably pushing someone else down.
Literally and physically,
Right,
right?
right, right.
Because you think about again rape culture, same concept. And so I think for me when you talk about men not being able to experience joy, I often wonder, like, I have straight friends who say I don't have a lot of friends. Why is that?
Hmm.
Right? I don't, I only have one or two good male friends, you know. My wife is my friend. Okay, but your wife is also your therapist and also
Right.
your mother in a lot of ways. Like that, like again, I'm not trying to paint cis men as terrible because I don't think that's what my MO is ever. But what I'm saying is that I think we really have to think about the ways that we are allowing ourselves to find happiness and fun and joy in a way that is not oppressive to other people. And I think that systems in this world has not allotted people that, even down, I would even say even down to, the relationships that women have, this
Yeah.
idea of being catty and mean to one another as fun. Like, why is that the only sense of joy that we have to have? I know it may sound like I'm throwing out a whole bunch of generalizations, but for me, this is me stepping back and looking at the world and saying, why are there so many miserable people in this world? And it's because a lot of us have not been given the freedom to think about joy. I think my therapist talks about this concept of radical joy a lot.
Hmm.
Um, and what does it mean to find radical joy, and really thinking about unlearning the way to do that is unlearning systems that have not served you or benefited you in relation to your happiness. That's what radical joy is.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, like uprooting systems that have
Mhm.
blocked you from accessing your joy. Right.
And for me, that was toxic masculinity. That for me, it was
Mm.
homo negativity. For me, that was
Mhm.
heteronormativity. Like, all of these concepts were things that blocked my joy. And so
Mm.
unlearning said systems is what has allotted me to find humor and joy in a lot of ways that I don't think I'd be able to have if I didn't understand how these systems worked or how these systems moved. So,
Yeah.
mhm,
So when you were describing that you think that, this idea of like that men aren't supposed to cry, as like this sort of pinnacle of masculinity, it's a thing that is often referenced, right? I think
yeah.
you and I and probably most of the people listening to this like agree that that's absurd and that crying is important and all that stuff. Um what it made me think of as you were describing it was that when you deprive yourself of the expression of these lows, Well, first of all, when you deprive yourself of the expression of lows, you actually, I believe, deprive yourself of experiencing those lows. Um,
Right.
that's the there's like a feedback loop in neuroscience. I believe it's actually
Mhm.
called the Schachter Singer feedback loop, which is really funny because it's exactly my last name. Where like the behavior, the feeling causes a behavior which contributes to the feeling, which contributes to the behavior, and it becomes this feedback loop that you experience. So when you prevent yourself from
Right.
expressing sadness or despair or loss or grief, um, or shame, or all these things, uh you actually experience them less. And my
Yeah.
guess, and I'd be curious if this is like part of the link that you're making, is that when you deprive yourself of the lows, you also miss out on the highs. There's something that
Right.
I think, um that you're pointing out for me that I had never really tied together, but that you yes, you don't see men or people who are performing masculinity in some way cry. They don't we don't society doesn't allow them to express sadness. Um but we also don't see expressions of joy. We don't see
Nope.
expressions of like elation and like celebrating yourself, or
Mhm.
even like professions of or professions like what uh words of like love and affection seem to be so foreign and hard to express. And
Yeah.
I what I'm hearing is that you see those as going hand in hand.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even thinking about it, like, so I watched the film, um, oh gosh, I wish I would have Palmer. That's it. I watched the film Palmer recently on Apple TV Plus, and if you've not seen it or if you're not familiar with it, it has Justin Timberlake in it, who is canceled in my book.
Ooh.
However, it was a good film. A friend of mine said, I really think you should see it. It's about a man who finds a relationship with a child who we assume, and again I say assuming, is trans, right?
Mhm.
They are very effeminate, they like feminine things, they carry themselves in a very effeminate way. And it was the unlikely relationship between this very cis het man played by JT and this young child who is showing very effeminate characteristics. And I say all of that to say that what that film really showed me was, like, I think about the times, I think often a lot about, especially even me, and like I said, it's so funny because today's been weird. I don't know if it's the energy, I don't know if it's just if it's the space that I'm in, but all of the conversations I've had today outside of like adult conversations I've had around bills and life and stuff,
Uh-huh.
they've all aligned in this weird way. This morning I told my therapist, I said, I know when I lost my spark for creativity or being able to be myself in the way I've wanted to, but I felt like I've lost it. And I say this as like a kid, like being a 12, 13-year-old kid, I felt like my spark as a little quote unquote boy was put out. And I don't know when that light or that spark went out, but I think about it a lot. My nephew is 2, and I watch him play, and I watch how creative he is, and I watch how much my brother pours into him to allow him to be his authentic self. um and watching the gender terminologies and the colors. If he likes
Mm.
pink, he gets pink. If he likes blue, he wants blue. If he wants yellow, he gets to wear yellow. Like my brother and his wife are very intentional on, I want my son to be able to have the life that we weren't allowed to have.
Mm.
And I think about that a lot. Like, Grayson is learning what joy is. Like, Grayson gets to be who he wants to be in a way that I didn't get as a little Black kid growing up in
Yeah.
SoCal. And so I think about that a lot. Like, what is joy for me now as a 35-year-old man? It's watching my nephew get to be his true authentic self in whatever fashion that shows up.
Oh.
My husband said if my nephew wants to play with dolls, he gets dolls. If he wants to play with a truck, he gets to play with a truck. Some days he wants to throw a football, some days he wants to be in the kitchen with my sister. Like, Grayson can do whatever he wants. And I think that's the thing I wish, when we talk about joy, like seeing Grayson smile and knowing that that's not being hindered
Mm.
in a way, that for me makes me feel so much better about the world. And I think that for me is what I'm hoping for other people, like to give their children the opportunity to just be happy in ways that I don't think that a lot of my generation got, if that makes sense.
That makes so much sense. Something came up in the 6 week
Mm-hmm.
boundaries and consent course that I just taught that I keep going back to. And it was this conversation around choosing, have like the learned feeling that and it was brought up in the context specifically by three people in the class whose parents are immigrants. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and the conversation was about how their parents don't like that there's this choice between I'm just realizing that
Okay, that's fine.
say Stella, my editor, uh erase that. I'm just going to talk about it more abstractly. Um okay. So there's this conversation that kind of keeps coming up for me around how authenticity is healing. Like it's literal medicine for
Mm,
your body. Like not in a not as a metaphor, but as a literal like healing agent. And then
dang.
this
Yeah.
this question where, from like previous generations around this false idea that we have to choose between security and authenticity. Um,
Mm,
and the way that I've been thinking about that in my family in particular, um, I'm Jewish, Eastern European Jewish. Like everyone was from like Poland, Russia, Hungary in my family. And both my grandfathers fought in World War II. One of my grandfathers actually liberated a concentration camp on the ground in
mm.
Germany. And then came home and like went to work at a pharmaceutical company. And
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
only recently dawning on me how repressive that is. It could have been
Yeah.
any job, right? Like he could have been doing any number of things. The idea that I'm like what I'm looking at is the way that he was unable to express any authenticity at all. Like
Right.
what kind of life is that? Who is my grandpa? Like I
Right.
don't really know. And he died
Right.
a few years ago. Um I don't have a good sense of who he is, and I would venture to guess that
Mm,
he might not either. So what you're talking about is like watching your nephew become their authentic self and finding that for yourself too. um that
mm,
what you're like witnessing and what's bringing you joy is like the negation of that idea that it's a choice you have to make, that it's an either or situation. That's also what your
mhm.
career is. It's a manifestation of that.
Yeah. And in a lot of ways, I'm still, like you said, when you said hodgepodge, I laughed because, there's still a lot about my career that I don't know and that I don't understand and that I'm still struggling to find that. And like I said, I was talking to my therapist this morning about, finding that quote unquote dream job. I don't know what my dream job is. I don't even know if what I'm doing right now is quote unquote the dream. We're
Yeah.
all kind of lost in a way, but when you talk about this sense of like authenticity and healing, I think the stuff that, and it's funny because I've had people come to me and say, you just have this light about you and you just have this way of moving throughout a space that just makes people feel so validated. And I said, I'm starting to understand and know that light as being my authentic self.
Mhm.
It's me not putting on this performance for people because because this is the thing, Mia, I wake up every morning going, I already know that the world hates me.
Mm.
And I know I've said it this way, and I've had people go, oh my God, that is such a terrible thing to say. And I go, but it's the truth. I am everything that the world has tried to eradicate. Okay. I am fat. The world hates fat people. I am Black. The world hates Black people. I am queer. The world hates queer people. I'm also, in a lot of ways, even though I'm middle class now, or so, so like I genuinely
Class now, but
okay. Yeah. I was saying, so I'm middle class now, and but I grew up poor, and the world hates poor people. So like I literally wake up every day in subtle ways being reminded that this world does not care about me at all. And so to try, how much am I selling myself short by putting on a performance for said world and knowing that they're still going to hate me anyway? Does that make sense? And that's, so I think that's what people see. Like I genuinely move throughout the world going, as much as I and I'm not going to front, I do care what the world thinks about me, because obviously I wouldn't work as hard as I do if I didn't, right?
yeah.
Everyone's to have their name in lights. Everyone, like, I mean, that's why I have a blue check on Twitter. I want the world to know my work, okay?
Yeah.
But I think there's the sense of, as much as I work for the world to know my work and to respect my work, there's still this element of, I know y'all don't care for me anyway, so I'm gonna say it the way I need to say it. And if you don't like it, oh well. And I think that's what I think is resonating with so many people, is that I'm recognizing more and more that the more I do my work, the people who respect me and respect my candor in the way I do my work are the people I need to be working with / working for. I don't care about the exec that says Jonathan is a problem, because obviously I'm never going to be in that room with that exec anyway. I need to be in the room with the exec that's saying, we like the fact that you're out here lighting stuff on fire and flipping tables, because that's what we need in this company. And so I think for me it's about liberation, right? It's about knowing. I say this all the time too. I think about this a lot daily. You know, MLK tried to be kind to police and they killed him. Malcolm X hated the police and they killed him. So
right.
like, I mean, I wish I could see people see me right now going like, I'm living in between that of like, I'm still going to die regardless of, and I don't say that in a literal sense. I'm praying I live a little bit longer. But what I'm saying is, even if I stroke the back of the police officer or I stroke the back of the systems that oppress me, they are still working to eradicate me.
Right.
So I have to do my work from my place of truth. And that's where all of my work starts. What is my truth, and how do I make sure that shines? And I think that was my long way of saying that, right? Like, I think we need to be more cognitive of what our truths are. And that's where authenticity starts. Do I like Brussels sprouts? No. Then why the hell do you keep eating them? Do you like broccoli? No. Well, why do you keep eating it? So if you are queer, why do you keep saying you're not queer? That that's a part of who you are, and who you were meant to be in your own way. And we go, oh, religion is a religion that. I go, you know what? Until I meet Jesus, I don't really care what Jesus got to say. No shade, but I never met the brother. So how am I gonna sit here and live a life being so concerned about somebody that I ain't met? I don't know him. It's silly to me. So I think that for me is truth. Like, if someone else is mad, this is my thing, and then I'll shut up. My thing is pay a bill and then I care, because I have I don't have the time to. I'm too busy out here trying to keep my lights on. So yeah.
Whew. Well, okay. So one of the things that you said that I want to dig into a little bit here is you're talking about knowing what's true for you first and foremost. And
Right.
I think
Yeah.
that that is something that is not promoted largely because it
Hey, yeah.
thwarts, if too many people knew who they were and what was important to them, all the tables would be flipped over, and maybe we
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't have people doing work that we like also really need done. I don't know. Um, but what what is so clear to me from the outside is that you do have this like core of this is what I believe, this is who I am, and what I and I hope that you feel the same way about me. I'm gonna talk assuming
Oh
that you
yeah.
do. Okay. But what has
Yes.
what has what has worked, what I've seen happen for me, I'm really resonating with what you're saying, that like what people are describing as your light is you being your authentic self, which translates as kind of giving no fucks. Right?
And sometimes you have to give a few,
Yes.
but I think we give too many.
Yes.
Go on.
So
Mm-hmm.
I agree. I think, and I appreciate what you said. Like, yes, you do care what people think. Of course, we care what people think. If I didn't care what people think, I don't know. I would walk around in like a tube that I could just float free. Like obviously I have to
I'd eat
shower
at
and whatever.
Chick-fil-A.
Yeah,
Yeah, I would.
right,
I
right,
would
right.
eat at Chick-fil-A if I didn't. Yeah.
Yeah. So great. I'm glad we're on the same page there. But this idea of like having your authentic truth is, we do so much like trying to predict how people are going to respond to us, how people are going to perceive us, what they're going to think of us. Are they going to think we're cool? Are they going to think we're stupid? Are they going to want to hire us? And da, 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 da. And what I tell a lot of my clients, and what I end up working through a lot in these classes that I teach, and of course this is like a lifelong journey for myself, um, is that the only thing that I can know for certain is how I feel and what I believe.
Right.
So what that
I love
means
that.
is that like using that rod, like that internal pillar of like, this is what I believe, this is who I am, it's like a thesis of an essay, right? Like every sentence that you write, every paragraph that you write has to like tie back to that thesis, or the essay
Mm.
makes no real sense and loses its train of thought and stuff. So if I personally have this thesis, then anytime I'm in a moment of like, I don't know what to do, where some people like reach for a pendulum, some people ask a psychic, some people ask God, some people pray. Like, for me, it's that rod internally that I can check with. And maybe sometimes I do use a pendulum or prayer or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But it's all coming back to that solid piece of myself, because that's all I can know for sure. I cannot know for sure how other people are going to perceive me.
Mm-hmm.
And doing the guesswork to try to anticipate that is fucking exhausting.
Amen. Amen. And I'm so glad that you cursed because I'm a sailor. So I was worried. I was like, I hope this is not one of those podcasts where I have to watch my language. So
Oh no,
thank you
these
for
are all
cursing.
rated explicit. It's like
Okay, great.
embedded.
Yay! Um, just kidding. No, I love that you say that because I think so, a big part of my story is rooted in religion. And I think that's why I wouldn't say I'm anti-religion, but I'm definitely very cognitive and very cautious of what I like to call groupthink. And I feel like groupthink is very much what religion is, right? Is
Mm.
that if Mia believes something and Nicole believes something and Judea believes something, then I have to believe it too in order for them to like me.
Oh wow.
Um, and I back from that, specifically being in a religion. I grew up a Jehovah's Witness. If you want to know about, I talk about it. I there's an I talk about it on my TEDx about what it was like leaving that org. But more recently, I've been writing a lot about it too. So you can find some of my articles
Yeah.
about that. But I say all of that to say that what has really helped free me in a lot of ways, and I mean free in both the emotional and I would say this idea of recognizing that at the end of the day, like much like you said, Mia, I can only answer for me. And I think it was getting to a place in my life where it was getting so hard for me to say, what are you gonna feel like when you get to that last day that you're here on this earth? If how are you gonna feel if you can't say you lived your life the way you wanted to live it?
Mm.
And that me is what made me say, I got to get out of here, because I think so many of us are so caught up with, well, what if my mom doesn't like it? Or what if my dad doesn't like it? I don't want to lose my family. Baby, that's what chosen family is for.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, what is my husband going to say about it? What is my cousin or my uncles or my aunties? And you spend 10, 15 years thinking that, and then one day they stop talking to you and you're like, man, I wasted all that goddamn time worrying about them, and now they don't even care about me. And so I I'm not saying that, I think there's this, and I've said this, and I'm still trying to work through what it truly means, because I don't know if it sounds silly. I don't know if it's a real thing, but I said I think there's a fine line between being selfless and being selfish. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that for me in this time in my life, and my husband also, I think, understands this in a lot of ways, both of our lives, we've been so selfless, meaning we've put so many other people in front of us. And we've put many other people's opinions and thoughts and ideas as truth and RT, right? Um, and then we were left with nothing on the other side of that. And so now I think both of us are in this place where we say we are a little bit selfish, because we can be. We've done the work to be selfish. We deserve the right to say, I am going to take up the space in this room and I'm not going to apologize for it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, who does Dr. Higgins think he is coming into this, or who does Dr. Higgins think they are coming into this space and thinking they're the smartest person in the room? I have 3 degrees. So that's my that if you want to take it up with the University of Redlands and the Board of Education, you can. But my thing is done the work to feel like I'm the smartest person in the room. I've overcome all of the barriers that education has put in front of me for me to feel like I'm the smartest person in the room. So I've done the
Right.
work. So I think about that a lot. Like, what work are we doing to ultimately validate ourselves? And I think I'm in this place where I've done some of the work and I'm continuing to do the work, and I'm begging other people to do their work around that as well.
Yeah. Oof, well said. Did you catch yourself misgendering yourself?
I did. Yeah. I'm so used to slipping into the him, and I'm really trying to get away from it. And so that's why I was like, caught it. And I said they, because I misgender myself often. And
I
I'm
do
like,
it
I
too.
don't use he. Yeah. And I'm like, oh, I gotta catch myself. Yeah. So
Oh my
yeah,
god,
I
that's
caught myself.
so
So yeah.
funny. I love that. I do it to
Mhm.
myself too, and I'm like, who are you talking about, Mia? But it's it happens. It's cute. It's sweet to do it to yourself and
Yeah.
be like, oops.
Mhm. Sorry.
um,
Yeah.
oh, you said something in there that I didn't write down quickly enough, and now I'm forgetting. I'm like searching for it in my head. You were talking about like knowing that you're the smartest person in the room and people trying to mm, I don't know, I can't remember. Fuck.
It's okay.
It was really good. It was something about, oh wait, it's like right there. You were can you remind me? You were saying
Yeah. So I had said, I said I think we basically I've grown up, so in so many words, I've grown up in a world where everyone tried to make me feel small.
mm-hmm.
And I think, especially
Oh, I
within
got
my
it.
education, go for it.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, it was the
Yeah.
selfish and selfless piece. Um
Yes. Okay.
yeah, so I have a BA in philosophy, which at the time
Hmm.
was like, why are you doing that? And now it's 12 years later, I'm like, whoa, thank goodness. Like 19-year-old Mia knew what the fuck was up. Um, even though at the time I was even like judging myself for it. So there was this I took a moral philosophy class, and there was this paper that we read about the word selfish, and it basically said, I mean, I'm going to like paraphrase it poorly, but um if if so it's a question of like, what is altruism? The
Right.
question is like, does altruism exist?
Hmm.
Because even when you do a quote unquote selfless act, you inevitably get something out of it. There's a Friends episode about this, right?
Hmm.
Like, you get some kind of gratification out of it. Maybe you meet somebody new, or, even when you like do something for free, like you get something out of it. So, is there such a thing as altruism? And this paper was basically saying like, who the fuck cares? Because the because the point really is like, if we're gonna say that there's no such thing as a selfless act, then we just need to add a word to the dictionary, because now what you're saying is that the word selfless still means selfish. And so now we
Yeah.
still need a new word that means selfless. And at that point, like, why don't we just draw a distinction between selfish
Hmm.
and selfless that doesn't require uh you not to be getting anything out of something in order for it to be a selfless act. And
Right.
this is kind of making me think of another like sexual analogy. I was using the pain and pleasure line before, but in sex, very often the best thing you can do is be selfish,
Hmm.
right? And I think so much, and like a lot of the people that I work with are, and myself included, are like struggling with the ways that we put other people first. It's like this people pleasing thing, and it's like and really what it does is it causes us to lose our sense of self, which is maybe the ultimate goal anyway. Is like, I don't want to have to pay attention to myself, so I'm putting more attention onto you. That's non-consensual service. It's really icky, it's codependent, blah blah blah. So what I've been learning is that it's that same positive side of selfishness that you
Yeah.
encounter in sexual scenarios, where it's like in a friendship, for example, I need to be able to say, this is what I need, and this is what a friendship means to me. And I can't be available to you if you're not also available to me in X, Y, and Z ways. And what can happen is that that part is seen as selfish.
Yeah.
And so it becomes this thing that we think we shouldn't do because being selfish is bad, quote unquote, according to society. When I think that the word selfish has a really bad rap. I think
It
we
does.
actually need to like redefine that word, because I think that selfish and selfless, if we were to make a Venn diagram, there's a huge overlapping section of that Venn diagram that we aren't really talking about.
Hmm. Yeah, and I hated the word selfish for a very long time. So actually, it's funny because I'm currently writing a book proposal, and every single theme of each chapter in relation to the book that I'm currently dreaming up of writing is a specific word I've been called in my life. Um,
Ooh.
and so like chapter, I think it's chapter 5, I talk about the word selfish, and all of the work that I've had to do around unlearning that word as a negative word, specifically because that was a word that my mom was, I call, we all have trigger words, right? Like some
Yeah.
folks in our lives will say like the word bitch is a trigger word, the N word for some people is a trigger word, being called fat is a trigger word. Well, my word was selfish.
Mm.
Growing up as a kid, my mom would constantly, and I think we've worked, so I can say this, and I don't think she'll ever listen. My mom hates listening to people talk, so she'll probably never hear this. But growing up, and I don't want to depict this as me picking on my mother either, because again, my mother did the best that she could, what she knew. And so I love her for that. But ultimately, us growing up, one of the things my mom would constantly call me, especially when I started to get into my teenage years, was selfish. My mom would say, you only think about yourself, you don't care about no one else in this family but you, your brother, all the things I've had to sacrifice for you, blah 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 blah. And as I got older and as I started to unpack where that negativeness came from with that word was this idea that in a lot of, and again, I'll speak from my own experience, so I don't want to make this a general statement. In a lot of poor families, specifically poor Black families, you're expected to be selfless all the time, right? You're expected to give so much of yourself without the expectation to get anything back. You're expected, like, your money is my money, and my money is my money, and her money is my money too. And so that's a lot of that's a lot of the onus and the mindset of a lot of minoritized families, where everyone is literally just trying to survive. The idea of you saying, no, this is for me, this is my opportunity for me to thrive, or this is my opportunity for me to shine, has nothing to do with you. That makes you selfish, right? um and so it took me a few years, especially in therapy, to really understand why that word, why I struggled with that word for so long, and what my mother was really trying to say when she used that word. I
Oh,
think from
interesting.
it was just yeah, there's so many things, and so that's the reason why, though. It's, this whole conversation around words meaning things, right? What is the real meaning, or what is the real foundation of the words that we use when we talk to people, or when we talk about people? And I think for my mother, that word selfish was this idea of saying, you're centering yourself in a way that I was not able to prior to me having you. And now I'm angry about it.
Oh, wow.
Right. And so now me and
Right.
my mom have real conversations about that. My mom, I'm sorry if I ever made you feel like you had to give up your life for me and your brother. And I'm like, no, you never did, because I have the life that I want to have now. I was selfish enough to say, no, I'm going to get my degrees, and I'm going to have my partner, and we're going to have our, like, I was able to say that that has nothing to do with you. Right now I can look at, you know what I mean? I don't know if it
Yes.
makes sense, but
No, it makes total sense. And a light bulb just went off in my brain because I talk a lot about how, like, in my classes and stuff, like how insecurity is selfish.
mm-hmm,
And that has been a little bit triggering for a couple people. Have been like, I don't know, the word selfish, like, and I think what I mean when I say that is, like, in a very literal sense, your insecurity centers you,
yep,
right? And I mean
mm-hmm,
that even like internally. When I'm feeling insecure, all I'm thinking about is myself. I've stopped listening to you. I don't know what we're talking about anymore. I'm only worried about, totally preoccupied with recovering and proving to you that I'm not a total idiot. And so as you were talking, I was thinking about all of that, and then the light bulb was, do you think that authenticity is selfish?
mm. Well, I would say yes and no. I would say, and I know people, I hate when people say yes and no. I have to say yes and no, because here, I'm gonna move, and you may want to cut this out because it's gonna take me a second. Sorry.
Okay.
Um, I I would say authenticity is selfish in a lot of ways, because what you're doing in a lot of ways is taking up space. Well, first, I would say, I guess it has to do with, damn, that's a good question. I think it has to do with the timing. I think it has to do with, they say there's there's time and space for everything, right? I think in relation to authenticity, I know for me, when I'm feeling my most authentic self, it's because I'm taking back space that normally wouldn't be given to me anyway, right?
Yeah.
So that's when I'm being selfish. I'm like, no, y'all gonna give me my 40 acres and a mule. But when you're being authentic, like, I guess the question is are you being Oprah authentic, or are you being Tyra Banks authentic? And I think we you know what I mean? Like, are you are you genuinely worried about helping someone when you're being authentic and wanting to say, like, no, come on in here and be yourself. I want to make sure you feel seen. Or are you genuinely saying, well, I had this experience and it's all about me and I want the world to know what I've been through. Like, I don't personally feel like I operate from that place. Like, I'll tell people, like, yeah, my life has been shit, but I want to make sure that other people who know that their life has been shit, that their life doesn't always have to be shit, and
Mm.
that this is the way we're gonna make sure that you know that. Like, it's not about me per se. It's about me helping other people to basically get free, right? Like, how do we get free from these systems that have kept us to make us feel that way? Whereas with, like, I feel like Tyra Banks is more like, I've been through this and you don't know. So I guess I say I guess I say in so many terms, so many words. Is authenticity selfish? Yes, but you have to ask the question, who are you being authentic for? I think that's the real
Ding,
question.
ding, 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 ding. Woo!
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that was the strike. That was it. Who are you
Okay.
being authentic for?
Right. Is it for you or is it for the liberation of other people? And I will tell you this for me. There are moments where I do, like, for instance, right now, and this is me being authentic. Something that has been driving me nuts is the fact that I don't have a blue check on Instagram.
Neither do I.
It it bugs the shit out of me, and I don't know why, but it does, that I can't get verified on Instagram. That's just me being human, right? I want people to know that I am the Dr. John Paul who's out here doing the work, right? That's where I say that authentic, like, I'm being authentic. When I say I'm being authentic in this moment, I'm being authentically selfish and vain and saying, yes, that blue check would make me feel a hell of a lot better on Instagram. However, I also know that that blue check on Instagram would allow me to do more work because I would be verified, et cetera, right?
Mm.
So there's that. But the other part of that is the reason why I created Dr. John Paul, the reason why I write the way I write, the reason why I'm telling the stories that I tell is so that way when people feel like they're alone or they're in a dark place, they can go back to my work and say, I'm not in this by myself, you know? So I think both of them can be true. I think both of them, I don't think any of them are bad. I just think that we need to be more real with ourselves and saying, like, nah, sis, like, are you genuinely doing this because you genuinely want to do it for you? Or are you doing this for the good of the people? And I think that's, I saw something recently and I said, that is the whole theme of this movie. I'm
Mm.
not sure what movie it was, but I felt like I watched something recently where I had that, where the question of authenticity was at play in the story. That might be the next pilot I write, but go on.
Mm.
Mhm, mhm.
You know, I love that idea around being authentic, like for the greater good, or being authentic for yourself. And I think that both are incredibly important.
T.
So what I think that we're doing here is kind of redefining the word selfish. And I think that there's different kinds of selfishness, and maybe there needs to be a new word for selfishness that's like merely for self, you know, for personal gain,
Yeah. Hmm.
because I see that. And when you were talking about um only seeing depictions of men experiencing joy when they were like standing on the backs of other people, I
Hmm.
see that in white feminism, like the way that
Ah.
that turns up in white women. And I consider myself to be one, and something that I constantly have to look at is that the only way that we are going to get anywhere is so long as there are still people beneath us.
Mm,
And that is like, that is one of the most disgusting drives that I witness, and I see it all over the place. I see it in intimacy coordination in
hmm.
the field. I
Yeah.
see it all over Hollywood. I saw it when
Hmm.
I was a casting assistant. And it's this idea that like that you it's still falling for the idea that there has to be a hierarchy,
Hmm.
and that there is a scarcity of stuff, and so you need to hoard it, because if you were to share it or bring anyone with you, there would be less for you.
Right.
um so this idea around selfishness and authenticity, what I see that goes hand in hand, and I've never thought about this before, is that largely the people who are putting other people down in order to feel above are, they also lack that that core.
Mhm.
They lack
Well,
that
yes.
authentic core.
Well, I mean, think about whiteness at its core. I mean, so this is what I've kind of made my whole work around. So first of all, I was going to say, if your editor could put a bell sound in when you said white feminism, because I was like, ding, 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 ding. I've been trying to say that shit for 3 years and ain't nobody listen to me. So
Yeah.
maybe they'll listen to me and when Mia say it. So ding,
Mm.
ding, 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 ding. Editor, please put a bell in there. But I will say this, when you're talking about this idea of the hierarchy and of all of that nature, right? I think that's the thing that keeps white supremacy and whiteness as a whole alive, right? And I tell people all the time, my biggest thing in my work, and this is what I always start my conversations off with when I'm doing race work, and you were there when
Mhm.
obviously we had this training. I said there's a difference between whiteness and loving white people.
Mm.
And a lot of times we love whites over white people, if that makes sense, right? A lot of white people love whiteness. So, what is whiteness? We know what whiteness is. Whiteness is colonialism. Whiteness is patriarchy. Whiteness is I'm going power, right? Basically, at the end of the day, that's really what whiteness is how do I uphold and maintain power, even in all of my quote unquote intersections of who I am. And I'll say this: there are still some black, and I was just actually talking to somebody today. I've been talking about it all day. I was on an interview and we were talking about that, how like even in some spaces, I think a great example of that was RuPaul when they asked him about black people on his show at the Golden Globes last year. What's the Emmys or are the Emmys in the Golden Globes? I don't know what the hell, but it was either one of those. He was getting an award for something. I think it was the Emmys.
Mhm.
And someone asked him, what is he doing to champion black people on his show? And he was like, I am black people of my show.
Oh,
That in my mind, girl, yes. And I
wow.
say girl, not to you, girl. I'm saying girl, yes, like that's the T. But yes, girl, he mama is a mess. And I hate to tangent, but that's the thing that I also wish. I hate that we're here. I can't not be doing this work and not include media in some way, shape, or form. So when we talk about RuPaul and we talk about blackness and whiteness and all of that, there are a lot of people who look at whiteness as I want to uphold power in whatever way I can. And I'm going to do that in whatever way I can. And that oftentimes means slamming the door in front of other black and brown people or other trans people or other non-binary people. I say all of that to say that I think what folks need to step back in, even in their authenticity, and say, am I doing this to get ahead, to be on top of somebody? Or am I doing this to make sure that somebody else can thrive? And
Mhm.
I know for me and mine, when I open my computer each day, yeah, I want the accolades. I would love an extra check. I would love a couple of extra zeros at the end of the checks that I get. But I definitely think about it like and I'll say this transparently, what has not taken me out of the writing game? Because these last couple of months, I've been like, I don't think I'm gonna make it in this. I don't think this is for me.
Mm.
Um, but I think when I think about each day, when I get back to when I open up Final Draft and I start working on pilots or start editing or taking notes, I'm thinking about that day that I get to say, when someone comes into my office and says, Dr. John, we would love to tap so and so to be the showrunner of this show. And I go, actually, I know this trans black woman who I think is a great writer. Call her. I want her as my showrunner for this show, right? That's the stuff I'm thinking about. While it may seem like I'm thinking about me in this moment, my long-term goal is like even now, like Vic may hear this, so I'm gonna frame this in the sense so Vic doesn't be like, ew, John. I think Vic knows my heart. Vic is my assistant, and there were other people. I had put out a call a couple months back out wanting and needing an assistant. I was saying, I don't have a lot of work. I need somebody who can help me kind of just stay. I want to pay somebody who can basically say, girl, get your shit together.
Mm.
That's what my assistant is for. Awesome. Let me know. And I ignored them when Vic jumped in my inbox because I knew Vic was a trans person of color. And I was like, this is why I'm doing this. I want to make sure that whatever money I'm getting, I can kick back to them because I
Right.
know That it's not about even Vic needing it. It's about, this is what I'm doing this for. Is to make sure that Vic can have the life that they want to have, right? So it's not charity work for me. It's genuinely about, how do I open the door to make sure that other people get the knowledge and the access and the opportunities that normally wouldn't come their way because someone else is sitting in that spot, if that makes sense.
And because, as you said, the world hates them.
Yep.
Yeah.
Bingo.
What you are describing is the process of using that pendulum and
Mm-hmm.
like gauging, all of these incoming like applications and people who are interested, gauging all of that through the lens of your personal moral compass. And that's how you
Mm-hmm.
make your decisions. It makes decision making easier because you
Mm-hmm.
know who you are, and making those choices has to align with why you do what you do.
Mm-hmm. And I know that, and I know that opportunities may not always come my way, but even just recently, I'm working on a project with, shout out to my girl Tori. But we're working on a project for next month. And you know, it's centering trans Black women. And I had pinged another friend of mine to help, and I told her how much she would be getting paid. She's like, oh God, like, I believe me. And I'm like, girl, yes, my job. My job is to be thinking about y'all. Like, my job is to be thinking about, who can I put on, who can I pass an opportunity to, who can I use my platform to elevate, who can I use my who in my platform can I to love on more, because I know the world's not loving on trans Black women like that. I
Yeah.
know that trans people as a whole are not getting the love that they deserve. So if I can make someone else, through my own authentic ways of working and moving in this world, if I can make anyone feel seen or feel valued or feel heard, that to me is my authenticity. Like, that's what I'm here to do. And I thought about this a lot in college. I don't think about it so much now because I'm like, I don't know if you know who Maxine Waters is, but she said that
Mm-hmm.
somebody tried to shoot at her a couple of years ago, and she was like, if you shoot at me again, you better not miss. I used to
Oh.
be that girl that was worried about getting getting killed for doing the work that I do. But now I'm like, if you come for me, girl, you better make sure you don't miss, because I'm coming back at you. But I definitely believe that, like, I'm my work, I feel like I've in my own right have been called to help liberate other people who may not have been seen or heard in their worlds or in their lives. And I'm hoping that, even just with the glimpse of me, I always say Marsha P did it for me, Audre Lorde did it for me, Bayard Rustin did it for me. James Baldwin did it for me. Like, I have the duty to do it for other people, So,
Yep. Yep. The mission is clear.
amen.
Mm-hmm.
So are these checks, honey, because they clear too. How you doing? I always tell me, you may not like what I got to say, but that check still go clear.
Oh my god. Yes. Oh, okay. Well, Dr. John, so we have to wrap up somehow. I always ask what if you can give 3 of the most influential experiences or pieces of media or conversations or people in your life that have led you to the way that you think today.
Mm. Yes. Okay. So a mixture of things. I would say some of them are living, some of them are not. I would say the thought and the praxis of Bayard Rustin, I think was really big. I actually dedicated my dissertation to him before I found James Baldwin's work. So I would say it would be a toss up. I'm saying my number one is James Baldwin / Bayard Rustin. Their
Okay.
praxis on how they saw the world is my number one. Please visit them for that. They have writings, they have work.
Mm-hmm.
For folks who don't know who Bayard Rustin, and Bayard Rustin actually helped lead MLK with the entire civil rights movement. So that's who Bayard Rustin. My number two would be Audre Lorde.
Mm-hmm.
Audre Lorde, in the sense of the fact that she helped me navigate my mental health in a way that I don't think I would have been able to actually fully vocalize. Like, she helped me find the words to tell my therapist what I needed
Oh,
in
wow.
relation to being a Black queer person. A lot of her writing, specifically when she got cancer, the ways that she was talking about health and her wellness as a queer person, a queer Black woman, really helped me formalize what type of care and what kind of relationship I needed to have with my therapist. So I wrote an
Wow.
article for Afropunk about that, about how Audre Lorde helped me kind of. She was the blueprint for my mental health journey. The last person is a living person. If you do not follow them, you should. Travell Anderson is another non-binary media figure. Not only are they my friend,
Hmm.
they are also a colleague, and I'm shouting them out because when I first met Travell, me and Travell had met in the space of like work. We were at an event together. They were like, "Oh, here's my phone number. Let's stay in touch." Blah 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 blah, and we became friends over time. And then one day they pulled me to the side. I say pulled me to the side in terms of they sent me a text and they said, "Girl, when are you going to acknowledge that you're a bad bitch?" And I had never had anybody like come to me that way of like, you're not giving yourself the credit you deserve. So I just want to know, when are you gonna allow yourself to be seen as a bad bitch? And so I say Travell Anderson, in the sense that they have helped me come to terms with the fact that Dr. John Paul is a bad bitch, and that she's out here doing things that a lot of people wish they could. So I say Travell Anderson is my number three of being that girl that you should know slash should be following.
Cool.
Mm.
All right, we'll put it in the show notes. Um, and some of these articles, and I'm gonna read some of these
Mhm.
articles.
Yeah.
All right, Dr. John, this has been such a pleasure. Thank you
I had
so
so
very
much
much.
fun. Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you for doing this with me.